Hi, and welcome to the Healthcare CEO Show, where you'll find actionable insights on healthcare leadership from the best and brightest in the industry. I'm your host, Daniel Fernandez. Let's get a pulse. Today, we're welcoming Shelly Sun Berkowitz to the show. She is the founder and executive chairwoman of BrightStar Care, and she's an absolute titan in the healthcare space, leading high-power teams for over 2 decades. Shelly, welcome to the show.
So glad to be here. Thanks so much.
I'm excited to ask you some questions today. I know there's a ton we can learn, specifically about your journey, and I'm curious to know about where you're headed after this. So let's take it back to the very beginning. Now, BrightStar was started back in 2002, correct?
It is. Yeah, that's right.
And where did the idea come from to even start it?
I'm an accountant by background, so somewhat risk averse. So it came about through a personal experience. I was looking for home care for, at the time, my fiance's grandmother, and she needed both non-medical and medical care. And she was in Florida. We were in Illinois, and there wasn't one company that provided both non-medical and medical. And I just thought that was just crazy. I mean, most families need both at some point during a journey. So we wound up hiring 2 different companies. They don't talk to each other, and navigated that for about 6 months. Grandma Pat passed away the day before we got married in early 2002. And I spent a few months just thinking about, could someone do this better? And I just couldn't let it go. I didn't realize I was meant to be an entrepreneur. And if there hadn't been such a passion to help families find what I had been looking for, I don't think I ever would have been. But it was just something I couldn't let go of. So I spent, about 6 months during 2002 talking to a lot of nurses and caregivers and discharge planners and families, and seeing if there was indeed this gap in the market in Illinois that we had experienced in Florida. And it turned out that we were probably onto something. And so in October 2002, started BrightStar Care. At the time, it had a much less cool name because I was on a really tight budget, and so something somewhat generic to get us started. And it really resonated with families, but it came about from a personal experience and then a personal passion to help families across the country eventually find what we had been looking for as a family and couldn't find.
That's a wonderful story, and I think that will resonate with a lot of other founders as well. You found a need and then you filled it, but not only to fulfill your own needs, but the needs of so many others, and you've done so, for a long time since, which is amazing. So 2002, we founded the company. What was the original name? You have to let me know. I'm so curious.
Healthcare Solutions.
Healthcare Solutions. Okay. Yeah, we all started with something, Yeah, I think we started with a symphony, and we used an I because we thought we were being trendy, and people called it symphony. And everywhere we went in networking events, were like symphony. And it's since evolved to Allegro, which is phonetically correct, but we all start somewhere.
Exactly.
On our journey. Okay, so you're in 2002. You're at a single location, I'm assuming?
Correct.
At what point do you add a second location, or what does the next stage look like?
Yeah. So in 2004, we added a second company-owned location in early 2004. And before the end of the year or in early 2025, we added a third.
Okay. And then somehow along the way, you get this idea to franchise, correct?
Absolutely. So we started franchising, did the legal paperwork in 2005, opened our first franchise in 2006. But how it came about was my mother-in-law at the time was an investor in hotels. She was getting ready to buy a 2-pack, one of which was a Choice Hotels, and we were just going to become the franchisee. And so I went to new owner and new manager training because we put 25% of the investment in. I'm very conservative with money, and our business at BrightStar by that point was successful and was profitable. So I invested in these hotels. And at Choice Hotels new owner training, I was like, wow, I think I could franchise BrightStar. I could find other business minded people who are really compassionate, see the need, maybe they've experienced in their own family like I have, and they want to be a part of the solution and have the honor to help other families in their community go through this journey in a less stressful way, in a high quality and high service way. And that's what ultimately led me to franchise the business. I didn't even realize that really franchising was beyond maybe hotels and McDonald's and other restaurants. But as I started kind of looking into franchising, talking to franchise attorneys, it was everywhere we looked, whether it was pet care or daycare or picking up dog poop in the lawn. I mean, like lawn care services. I mean, it's in every service and business sector you could possibly imagine. And so, why not franchise BrightStar so we could take care of more families across the country?
Okay, so you have an accounting background, you're risk adverse, but yet you're taking risk. I mean, these are big risk.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it felt like it was less of a risk maybe because I was finding in some ways partners that were bringing capital, passion, energy to be able to help us expand nationally. And so I think for me, there were two routes to be able to help more families.
okay.
I would take on outside money or large amounts of debt to open more of my own.
Yeah.
That felt riskier then leveraging the investments I had made in technology, in branding, and kind of marketing, and systems and processes. And so, if I could take what is kind of the essential elements of franchising,
Yeah.
and parlay that to other people and use their kind of hard work and passion and energy and ultimately capital, it would allow me to expand, I thought, in a less risky way, but hopefully
Yeah.
in a way that took better care of our country's moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, because it wouldn't be just an employee 1,000 miles away from the mothership. It would be an invested, committed owner who would put their own capital in, like I had in the beginning. And it was as much their personal reputation
Yeah.
as their professional reputation to do it right.
I think one of the wonderful things is as a founder, you found the value in partnerships very early on. I mean, really
Very
within
much
a
so.
handful of years, and then leverage those partnerships to help scale, which I think is incredible. Um, Now let's go back to the risk part because I think that's always fun, especially for risk adverse people. What were some of the? You mentioned a few things that you invested in, but what were some of the biggest bets you made?
I think technology was a big bet.
Okay.
I hired programmers for hire, made sure I owned the intellectual property, but it was hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2003, 2004, um, realizing that we weren't going to scale faster without technology to help us. There were some home care softwares off off the shelf, but they were
Yeah.
non-medical. There weren't any that were non-medical and medical. And from day one, my business model was both home care and medical staffing. And I
Okay.
was very unusual in that. But that was another part of kind of the secret sauce. That full continuum of care was part of it. And we talk about it a lot. But I recognized to be successful, it was really going to be all about the caregivers and the nurses. And I listened to many of them before I started the business.
Okay.
They love the thought of coming and working within home care. They're taking care of one patient at a time versus 10 to 15 per shift in a nursing home, as an example, right? Less paperwork, more patient facing, more quality of care. But many of them were scared to pivot from institutional care to home care because when their patient passed away, went on vacation, went into the hospital,
Yeah.
their paycheck went away. And most lived paycheck to paycheck. And so for me, that blending of home care and medical staffing was
Yeah.
a way to attract healthcare workers and give them some peace of mind, like I was trying to do with families, that when and if their family stopped care, that at least for a period of time, I could plug them into a nursing home schedule
Yeah.
until I found another family or their family came back to restart home care. Recognizing for most, the preference was always home care, but
Yeah.
you got to provide for your family and recognizing that was a real a real heavy burden for a lot of our healthcare workers. I needed to solve that from day one. So our original business model solved for both.
And you gave them stability, which is very important, which
Correct.
would become more important in the years to come.
Correct.
You're talking about so HHAs, CNAs, LPNs, and RNs.
And RNs, yeah, some
Okay,
therapists, a
okay,
smaller part of our business, but yes, all the way through that spectrum.
okay. Now, company owned versus franchises. You've got a subset of companies that you own yourself, and then you've got franchises. As you're growing, where's like where how do you differentiate between the two? And it's obviously leaned more into the franchise aspect of things.
Yeah, so I needed capital early on. Again, kind of
Hmm.
going back to being risk averse, and so I sold my second and third company owned to franchisees, but at a higher price than just the franchise fee to raise capital to allow me to invest in support to support more of the franchisees I was bringing on board. I always kept one company owned store. I really believe that was important. If I was advising someone, and I do to many, thinking about what franchise should I invest in, I wouldn't invest in a franchise that didn't have a company owned location. It's real easy to teach others what to do, but if you don't, or if you're not doing that from an informed place where you
Yeah,
always have a test kitchen to continue
yeah,
to tweak and tinker and make it better, to me
yeah,
you can't be an optimal franchisor if you don't have that. And so I always believed in keeping one. We had an opportunity. We really wanted to be in Iowa, and we had a small business owner have their business up for sale that had a similar mix of business. So we did buy a what became a company owned location kind of along the journey way. And then we hit COVID. And hitting COVID, we really recognized so many things.
yeah,
But we recognized that we couldn't really support our franchisees in all the ways we would want to because we only understood what it was like to run locations in the Midwest.
right.
And politics and policies and marketing strategies and referral sources and mix of business and payers were very different coast to coast. And so, with intentionality, we tried to expand our company owned portfolio
Yeah,
to be about 10%. So we kind of stopped at 35, which is how many we have right now. I don't know that we have to keep 35, but
yeah,
that learning was really important. And I think it really informed the investments that needed to be made in technology and in automation around AI bots, around revenue cycle management, around connectivity, around scalability. Because when we were running that many locations, while we don't have a franchisee that runs 35, we do
yeah,
have franchisees that run 5, 10, and more.
right,
And when we only had two,
right.
three, we couldn't see the scale that needed to be supported
Yeah,
until we had the company owned. And so it was really important for a period of time to
yeah,
also see different sources of business, different areas of opportunity, so we could broaden the spectrum of what we could support and bring to all other franchisees. So I think it was an important part of our history. I've since
yeah,
sold, to a
yeah,
wonderful private equity firm, and I think the future may be a different mix of franchise and company owned, with less company owned and more franchised. And I think that's okay,
yeah,
as long as who are running our company prior company owned locations are culturally core value
right.
quality aligned. And so I
Yeah,
think that'll be an important part of the process as we evaluate. But if we want to scale and grow faster, and that's usually why private equity comes into a sector or into a brand, it can be more effective to take resources and focus them on supporting our existing franchisees to buy more, and scale faster, and to bring on more franchisees and support them in an even stronger way than we have historically done, which is very strong, but likely could be
yeah.
stronger as we accelerate growth going forward.
I've got a lot of questions now. So we're just kind of worked our way right up into the to the sale point, which happened earlier this year, correct?
Yes, at the end
Okay.
of February.
Now between 2002 and 2025, there's a 23-year gap. Okay. So this is one of my interesting questions to founders. How do you keep the fire burning for 23 years? Because I know myself as an owner, it ebb and flows a little bit.
It does, but I mean, I am as
Yeah.
passionate about what we get to do and the families we take care of
Yeah.
today as I was when I started it. I mean, I've had the honor to work directly with two families in the last week, helping
Wow.
them get to the right franchise location or company owned location, get their care started, and just see the relief when they knew someone was really there to help them and they cared. I mean, that passion, that heart is still there now. Now I'm a minority owner and
Sure.
executive chair of the board, but my passion hasn't changed. I mean, so, over the years, it was always about innovating and taking it to the next level so we could continue to provide the best care, we could have the best quality, we could support our franchisees. And so the two stakeholders I have always had front and center, and my team was really important. Our caregivers and our nurses, we couldn't have grown without either set of stakeholders.
Yeah.
But front and center, whenever challenged with any decision or any decision that needed to be made that was unpopular, and that's what founders have to be willing to do, is do things that are unpopular
Sure.
because they're necessary, because industries don't stay stagnant, they evolve. And so for me, that consumer, that country's parent and grandparent was
Yeah.
always my true north. And then next it was about my franchisees who put their livelihood on the line. They invested their time and their money to build a successful business, and that those two were
Yeah.
always my focal point of every decision, every innovation, every 24-hour day during COVID was focused on those two sets. And so it's been a journey of evolving, right? So
Yeah.
bridge that 20-year gap. We founded in 2002. We really started franchising in 2006. 2008, we began a national account portfolio. Some of my corporate career had been with Blue Cross Blue Shield and CNA Insurance, and always follow the money. Who's going to pay for home care services? And it might not always be able to be dependent just on the end consumer. The end consumer deserves high quality care. And
Right.
so I believed we needed a national account program and a set of personnel, especially since we had skilled services. Most of our
Yeah.
national account program is utilizing our nurses.
Okay.
Became very relevant during COVID because we were honored to be selected for one of the COVID vaccination trials and one of the COVID therapeutic trials. And so we were able to pivot our nurses who were not going into the home as much for a short period of time and pivot them towards other things that were a huge opportunity. So national account program in 2008 was a big part of kind of our, how do you keep shaking it up and keep it exciting and interesting. 2010 to 2012, we reached out to Joint Commission to say, you don't have an accreditation in the home. I'd like one. I'd like to not have to be big sister to all of my franchisees to make sure quality is at the highest level. I'd love to require that as part of my brand to make sure that across the country, all hundreds of our locations are operating at the highest clinical level. Gives peace of mind to me, peace of mind to the families who are selecting us. And so 2012 was very
Yeah.
much that. We were honored to be selected by Undercover Boss in 2012. I went, undercover as a boss, and I learned a lot from that. But I also recognized that our brand really resonated on national TV. It's a
Okay.
journey many of us are going through with our parents and grandparents.
Oh yeah.
I'm one of the only founders in this industry that's still involved in the brand, still
Mhm.
passionate as the day I started it in the brand. And so national TV really resonated for us, really allowed us to scale and grow. And so Undercover Boss was 2012. We
Yeah.
saw the impacts of that on word of mouth and increase in customers, increase in franchisees. And so in 2014, we began national advertising
Yeah.
out. And that has allowed us to reach a whole nother level of scale and brand awareness, visibility to help more families across the country.
Yeah.
And so I think each of those have been kind of evolutions that we've made. 2022, I began heavily investing in business intelligence and data and
Okay.
dashboards for our franchisees, because if they can see their own scorecard and how they compare to the rest of the network.
Yeah.
Most of my franchisees have big hearts, but they're also type A and very driven and competitive, and they want to win and they want to be the best. And if they see where they're not, they will improve performance,
Yeah.
improve quality, improve recruiting, retention, whatever those metrics, and they're in our dashboards. And so we've made, multi-million dollars of investment between 2022 to 2025 to get this dashboarding program in
Yeah.
place and to proactively highlight for our franchisees what they could be doing better and
Yeah.
aligning the support to help them do so. So I think
Yeah.
I've kept myself
Mhm.
challenged and engaged by reinvesting back in and finding the next big thing to move us forward. And, we moved us forward at the time I sold, trailing 12 months of $750 million in revenue and 435 plus locations. I couldn't be more proud of what we've built, the franchisees we've selected, the caregivers and nurses that are employed by the brand. And it's why
Yeah.
I chose to roll over a material amount, because my heart and my strategic mind and my connections in the industry aren't
Yeah.
done. I just had personal mom reasons for why I couldn't continue to do 70 to 80-hour weeks anymore, even though I used to.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what it feels like, what the weight of leadership feels like. You're talking about navigating through a financial crisis in 2020. And I mean, there's potential labor shortages right now with caregivers. I mean, it's a lot.
It's a lot, and it's a lonely place, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I have the support of a great partner. I've been
Yeah.
remarried for a year, been with Sean for 4 years. I finally have someone who will share some of that weight, but for most of my journey running BrightStar, I didn't have that. I was a single mom for 10 years, of the journey of BrightStar, and so carrying those burdens. I mean, I'd go back 2008 to 2010, right? When, kind of where we're at right now, where the consumer has less to spend, they're nervous about the economy,
Right.
things are happening in the macro environment. And so when that happens, growth rates start to compress at the franchisee level. They start to get nervous. Royalties start to come down. You have less money coming in, but franchisees need more support than they ever did. And so you have to be willing to, bring profitability down with intentionality as a franchisor to do the right thing for the long term.
Yeah.
And so that was a period of time where I led, and I think what I went through as a leader during that period of time, I think our management team is going to really have to think about that we're not in the same state that most of my management team weren't with me in 2008, 2009. And so
Yeah.
they haven't seen a downward, they've only seen an upward. And
Yeah.
I think we're in a new leadership time with a new set of skills that are required, including the resilience and
Yeah.
the willingness to kind of get back up and do it. COVID, um, I would say without COVID, I
Yeah.
would never have sold my business.
Okay.
And
Fair.
that's a pretty profound thing to say. But
Yeah.
COVID, unlike any other time, it was truly 24 by 7.
Yeah.
I felt like I held in my hands or the weight on my shoulders that our country's seniors were going to die
Yeah.
if I didn't get PPE, that
Yeah.
my franchisees were going to go out of business, and then our country's seniors wouldn't receive care if we didn't change the way PPP was originally driven. I don't know if anyone really understands how much time I spent in advocacy,
Yeah.
also while trying to run the business and keep the team, moving forward one foot in front of the other. But the original PPP wasn't set to apply to businesses that had not declined by
Yeah.
20%.
Yeah.
So it would have ruled out any of the essential businesses, including home care, even though our cost had dramatically increased with
Right.
PPE and
Yeah.
having to pay 40 to 50% more in wages to get people to go to work because everybody was scared.
Yeah.
And so I laid it all on the line. I sacrificed sleep, sanity,
Yeah.
stress levels high. But I was also a single mom at the time, and
Wow.
with twin boys that were homeschooled for, or not homeschooled, virtual
Yeah.
school for about a year and a half. And one of my boys is autistic.
Okay.
And so really needs a lot of support, a lot of structure. And I saw I couldn't give it to him. I wanted to. I'd
Yeah.
check on him every hour, but I couldn't be there. The business needed me too
Yeah.
much, and there was
Yeah.
too much at stake for me not to give everything I had to the business.
Yeah.
But in 23, my boys set off for college. They
Yeah.
graduated high school. Arguably, my autistic son shouldn't have graduated high school, but they're ready to move
Yeah.
him up and through. And we found ourselves in this world of real struggle. And
Yeah.
college, even with all the supports of the college we chose, was really difficult for him. And
Yeah.
I needed to go be with him in the because there's not a school like that in the Chicagoland area. So it's out of
Yeah.
state. I needed to be there 60, 70% of the time. And I was for the first 6 months, and then a third of the time in the next 6 months. I couldn't do that and be full time CEO.
Yeah.
So I had to look around my management team and pick the best candidate amongst that team versus having the luxury of time to go do a full
Sure.
search for like
Hmm.
who fits this seat, who fits this geography the best.
Right.
And fortunately, my COO was willing to, step up to the CEO spot in a crisis. I felt like I was in a crisis.
Sure.
I supported my son. And then, I was like, if I'm not going to be in it, if I've turned over the reins, I don't know if I can continue to have multi generations of wealth all sitting in the business rather than bringing in an outside partner. If I'm not going to be overseeing it, that's what private equity
Right.
does. But I need to find one that's culturally, clinically, clinical quality aligned before
Sure.
I'd feel good turning over the reins of my baby.
What advice would you give to somebody who's looking for a partner like that? Maybe they've scaled up like you have, and they're considering the exact same thing, because sometimes we are at that fork in the road and we have to make those
Absolutely.
decisions.
I think it's two things. I think before you get to the point of burnout, and I didn't realize how burned out I was as a business owner and as a mom post COVID. If I could have realized it, I would have in 2022 began an intentional CEO search process
Okay.
and spent 18 months before my children graduated high school helping that person get ready in the Chicagoland area at the corporate headquarters to take the business to the next level, and felt really great about that and
Yeah.
had more time for the transition with somebody I kind of handpicked that would have likely had a lot of franchise industry experience. I
Yeah.
probably had a short list of people that know that are probably watching this call that
Yeah.
know that I've been kind of thinking about them in a top seat scenario, but I didn't have the
Yeah.
luxury of that time. So my advice to founders would be if you're thinking this isn't something that you want to be doing for 5 to 7 years, and particularly 5 years post a sale,
Right.
start thinking about that succession planning now. Because if you're already having that thought, you probably already have some burnout or you're thinking about what's next. Start it
Yeah.
early. And then, I learned so much in selling my company. Some good, a lot of it bad. That I hope to parlay to others is you have to realize where
Yeah.
people's incentives are. And what
Okay.
I realized going through that process is the only one that really cared the most about the legacy, the culture, the families, the franchisees was me.
Right.
Because investment bankers get paid if any deal gets done. It doesn't have to be to a good buyer culturally, right?
Right.
Management team starts to, as you get closer and closer, start to see the dollars that they're going to get. And I had points in time where mine like try to get me to take a deal
Yeah.
with a buyer that was not culturally aligned. I mean, so,
Yeah.
we'd been in the process a long time. I know my team, financial folks especially, were
Sure.
exhausted.
Yeah.
But the party that we had been steered to by our investment bank, our lead investment banker, had
Sure.
been a repeat buyer for them.
Yeah.
And so it was good for their repeat business.
Of course.
if they won if
It was
one
in,
bid,
it wasn't necessarily in your best interest. It might have been.
but it wasn't in my best interest.
Right.
And so they began showing their
Mhm.
true colors, that it was
Yeah.
about dollars and cents, not about moms and dads, not about
Right.
franchisees, not about team members. The further along the process we went,
Yeah.
and some really kind of bad behavior at the end of November, kind of trying to like change terms and things like that that had already been agreed. And we're 2 weeks out from closing. And I'm like, no, pencils down. Like, I'm terminating exclusivity. I'm
Yeah.
done. I'm not. I would rather not sell, even if I have to step back in, depending what if my CEO would only stay if we
Sure.
did a deal. I would be rather step back in full time than turn my baby over with all the sacrifices over 22 years. I wasn't
Sure.
going to turn my baby over to somebody I didn't feel good about. And
Right.
so I walked away and I took a month and I just regrouped. And thank God I had the support of Sean to say, honey, whatever you want to do, like, I'm supportive, like, you don't have to sell, like, right. And he was the only person that was saying that.
Yeah.
Everybody else was trying to pressure me to sell and do a bad deal.
Yeah.
And so I put my big girl pants on early January. I reached out to our backup bidders. All were really excited to get another chance.
Sure.
They probably could have been our bidder, but we'd really been steered towards one that turned out to have bad behavior. And I give Spencer Moore from Peak Rock Capital a ton of credit, because
Nice.
all the others said, Shelly, we're so excited. Like, what does your schedule look like in the next 2 weeks?
Sure.
And I started scheduling out those meetings. And when I picked up the phone and talked to Spencer, he said, Shelly, if I get on a plane tomorrow, I don't know, telling what other commitments he had to his family, other
Right.
business meetings, whatever. He said, if I
Yeah.
get on a plane tomorrow, will you sit down with me like most of the day? And I
Yeah.
said, I will. And we ironed out, philosophy where they had owned a hospice business.
Yeah.
Every meeting opened with a focus on, or maybe an infusion business, focused on quality. Like, every
Okay.
business meeting didn't start with financials, it started with quality. And I had done that reference check and I knew that. So I knew we were aligned, moms and dads first. For me,
Right.
it wasn't about getting every last dollar on this first transaction. I
Right.
was willing to roll a material amount and knew eventually we kept doing the right things, we kept growing the right way. The money between transaction one and transaction two would be
Yeah.
fine, would be great, would be more than I would need, but I was going to feel good about who I partnered with. And so aligning on strategies, priorities, team, investment, everything, like in 4 to 6 hours, I felt like this is someone I really could partner with. And so January 5th, we entered into exclusivity. But before we signed it, I said, Spencer, I'm exhausted
Yeah.
emotionally, mentally, physically. My team is as well.
Yeah.
I've got I can do anything for 60 days. I'm resilient as can be. I've got 60 days. If we don't close by March the 5th,
Yeah.
on March the 6th, my pencil's going down. I don't care
Got
what
it.
anybody puts in front of me.
Yeah.
DocuSign comes in on March the 6th, I'm done.
Yeah.
I said, if you're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of money, I'm going to spend some more time and money in the next 2 months. You need to know, if we're going to do this,
Right.
that we've got to be done in 2 months.
This
And
is it.
so January 5th, we entered exclusivity. February 28th, less than 60 days, one
Wow.
week early, we closed and sold the business to an affiliate of Peak Rock Capital. And, we're 4 months in, and they have had the character and the focus on quality that they said they would,
Yeah.
but it has materialized in the way that I feel proud about who I chose to buy a part of my baby.
Thanks for sharing that story. That's really good advice. I interviewed somebody last season that did not make the right decision and had lots of regrets afterward. So it's good to hear of someone who just said, let's pause a minute and reevaluate and find a new partner. And I think that's a smart decision.
Make no mistake. I mean, there were a
No.
lot of sleepless nights
Sure.
and stress. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
when I chose to
Exactly.
walk away, but I'm like, I've put too much in. I
Of
care
course.
tue much. Hundreds, if not thousands of the families we take care of.
Sure.
Like, I personally introduced them into the brand through my
Right.
YPO network and, other places that people just know me.
Yeah.
And I can't do that and feel good about it.
Yeah.
They're not great people.
That's a very people first mindset. And I think that's a lot of people will resonate with that message. That's truly wonderful. I feel like I could talk to you all day, but you're an absolutely wonderful human being. We're gonna wrap at 2 final questions that I ask every guest on the show. One is, there's a saying, leaders are readers. Do you have a favorite book that you've read, whether it be both personal or professional?
Yeah, if it's going back over a period of time, I have probably read Good to Great 3-4 times. It's a classic for me, and I think it speaks to scalability and what's important. And so I think that one would be the one that probably stands out.
Yeah, that's a very good book. And the final question is really final thoughts from you. You've got an audience of executives, similar to yourself, some CEOs, some founders, even some investment people as well, some PE firms and such. What advice would you give to those other healthcare executives or leaders? Things that you have learned throughout the last 2+ decades of leading high-powered teams in healthcare?
I think it's never be afraid to reinvent the company, the services, the team, because what might have been right for a period of time, the only thing constant is change. And so, now we have hospital at home. We have a big bill that, is changing reimbursements, and alignment of what those incentives are going to change things. It means we're going to have to get comfortable with changing the services we provide, the bundling we do, how we price for things, and are invested in the outcomes, and how we leverage technology, because the reality is labor shortages aren't getting less. If anything, they're getting harder with immigration changes. And so if that's going to be the case, we got to figure out how we take cost out of the infrastructure so that the dollars can flow to where they should, which are the caregivers and nurses that are on the front line. And so how do you leverage AI to automate back office processes that are not value added from a quality perspective, that optimize workforce utilization, and get to conferences. And because I think the tent is big enough for us all to win, what we always need to be doing is thinking about how do we develop new programs, new processes that are disease focused, outcome focused, so we can have our consumers that are receiving care be benefited. And I think if the industry comes more closely aligned, we're able to do that.
The wonderful words of wisdom from Shelly Sun Berkowitz with BrightStar Care. Shelly, I want to thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It was a pleasure. Willing to do it anytime. I'm sure we could have done this for 2 more hours.
There's no doubt in my mind we could have talked probably all day. I love having you on the show. Maybe we'll have you on the show again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Healthcare CEO Show. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for more insights from the top. Until next time, lead boldly and care deeply. See you on the next episode.